This is the Westside King's Church podcast, where we aim to encounter and embody the surprising grace of Jesus.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this podcast, and especially you, Gerri. Thank you for agreeing to have this conversation this evening with me. I feel like David always gets the opportunity to be able to talk with you, so I'm really looking forward to this and super glad that I get a chance to have this conversation. For those who are Westsiders, they may recognize you. Actually, first, before we get into that, I'll just do a quick intro of myself. I'm Christin Woods, and I work at Westside, and I work in pastoral care, and I've been on staff for about 3 years. And Gerri, as I was just saying, people may recognize you as a lot of times at Westside for the last few years, we have during the month of January, February, we've had conversations around mental health. There's been the Ghost series and some seminars. And so people might recognize you from that. You have ran some of those seminars with David and joined us for some teaching on Sunday mornings. So I'm going to let you do a little intro for yourself, and so people can get to know you and sort of your background.
Oh, thank you. So I'm Gerri. I'm a marriage and family therapist as well as a psychologist in private practice in Calgary. I see lots of families and teens and individuals and whatever comes my way. I love what I do, and wasn't my first profession. I was actually involved in kinesiology and recreation management for a lot of years till I had little kids. And then we moved to Calgary, and this is kind of a direction I ended up going, and yeah, I really enjoy it. I enjoy teaching, and I enjoy spending time. I'm also involved, have been for my whole life, with Young Life, which is a youth organization, an outreach youth organization, and that's a part of my Christian heritage as well as my husband's, and so we're still very involved in working with teens. I love teens. So
great. That's awesome. So I imagine that you have likely been quite busy over the last couple of years. I'm sure you're busy anyways, but anyone I know who kind of works in the field of mental health has said that it has been very, very busy. Obviously, we've been in pandemic for the last 2 years, and we could probably do a 20-part series on the impacts of COVID on mental health. I won't ask you to do that. I'll just be grateful we get you for the one night. But so there's been a lot of conversations on this journey, thankfully, about mental health. People have been talking about it, which has been great. I feel like something that hasn't been talked about a lot, and perhaps just maybe out of a bit of a self-protection of, well, I don't know when this is going to end, so maybe we won't even go there yet. But something that I think is worth kind of unpacking and discussing is sort of this question of, how do we exit this pandemic? How do we come out of this after 2 years?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. It's a practical question. I'm glad you didn't ask me when. The question is how. And however long it takes, I think we have always been exiting it in some way. We've been learning things. We've been stalled. We've been waiting. We've been adapting. But I think there are a number of principles that continue to be important, whether this lasts a little bit longer or whether we're more out of it than we think at this point. I think it's about remembering and reminding ourselves and others of what we know helps. And as we stay consistent in that, we don't get as much stuck and caught in just rehearsing and going over and over and I don't know, making things worse socially or in our schools or whatever. I think we need to behave with practical wisdom. Instead of saying, well, we've never been through this before. I think the idea is that we have. It's a different set of circumstances, but the wisdom and the practicalities of what we know to do when these kinds of restrictions show up in whatever way, we will continue to need consistent structure. We might be needing to shift it or pivot it a bit, but not throw it out the window and start again. Consistent structure allows all of us to know where we're heading and how, and not leaving us kind of in the dark, which makes us more anxious and fearful and negative. I know this is used a lot, but I think we need to be present to knowing and acknowledging what our challenges are, instead of the sky is falling and it's only going to get worse, or minimizing it. We really need to be present and ask present questions. And then I think we need to wait. I think we need to wait with patience, not defensiveness. And wait is to understand what hope looks like. And then I think we need to be persistent. And one of the ways we need to be persistent is in our prayers for each other, for ourselves, for the world, for everyone we are connected to that has decisions to make with us. Yeah, those are some principles.
Yeah, that's all really great. And I love that you mentioned that hope piece, which we are going to get to that hope piece in a little bit. So in your experience, what are some of the main mental health concerns that people are continuing to struggle with?
Yeah. I mean, we always use words like always, and unprecedented, and looking for things that catastrophize where we are, statistic. I still think that, there are some circumstances that are unique, and our options might be more unique. But the themes are similar. Rather than us assuming what folks are facing, it might be more helpful for our listeners to do a bit of an audit and admit some of their own issues out loud, or name what they are, what they're struggling with, instead of what are other people struggling with, and joining in. Some of us are struggling more than others, and at times I think we have to ask ourselves, how bad is this? And what is making it bad, instead of it's all bad. And then what does it look like now, instead of what did it look like 6 months ago? Mental health issues can both be exacerbated by or triggered by an event like a pandemic and challenge our ability to cope. And then when it goes on over time, it becomes more difficult. So there's no question we're struggling and continue to struggle with some big things, but how it shows itself in mental health are some of the same issues. Escalating mood problems, destructive coping behaviors, the classic issues with anxiety and depression haven't gone anywhere. They've just morphed a little bit more, but the issues that cause those are classic. I think in the challenges we face with being isolated, not being with others who can see us or help us just because we're there, we are tending to default into secretive ways to manage some of the challenges, the mental health challenges, or just ignore them. And those are emotional struggles, they're mood struggles, and they're behavior struggles. And some of those are in reaction to loss or just chronic, ongoing difficulties. So if you think about, what can happen for a lot of people in the fall and the winter is seasonal affective disorder. So that it can happen every year, they can get themselves out of it, but they anticipate it and they know what's going on. Whereas in this case, some of that we're experiencing, we don't know how to name it, but there's a whole lot of loss going on here that feeds into mental illness. As it relates to the pandemic and some of the social stigmatizing that's going on, people are experiencing shame. They're experiencing job and financial insecurities. Even if they're not, they're worrying about it because they're hearing about it all over the place. They're sad. They're lonely. There's a whole lot of judgment of others as well as self that's going on here, which is not good for our mental health because we're over focusing on it, or we're defaulting into criticizing the news or the politicians or, the people at work or other people's kids. And we've become over-focused on that, and that's not a good thing for our mental health.
Yeah.
We all, not all, but many of us, particularly when we're not in structured environments, we struggle with impulsivity, and that can get out of hand in lots of different ways. I'll talk about that in a minute. Depression, obviously, when we're alone and we don't have accountability and we can just sink into whatever's haunting our cognitive thinking and not behaving properly or behaving in healthy ways. Obviously, the big one is anxiety. And when I spoke on anger last year, I want to remind you that sometimes anger is really underlying anxiety.
Right.
We get angry because we can't cope, or we think other people are controlling things we should be able to control. So we get angry at ourselves, we get angry at others we love or depend on or are responsible for, or who should be who they've always been and they aren't.
Yeah.
We struggle with grief as well. So
I really like this, the anger piece, because I actually think it's something we're seeing so much. So when we marry sort of that anger piece with this extreme language, these extreme words and phrases and scripts, like you said, unprecedented, and things that I think there's the whole list that none of us ever want to hear those words again. And I say that kind of half joking, but I actually do think it can be quite triggering, right? With, you constantly hear these words attached to something and they're constantly being used. But this anger piece, to be honest, I get a little worried seeing the dialogue back and forth and just seeing how polarizing it's becoming, and just we'll use the term, both sides are just so angry with one another, and we are seeing a lot of family breakdown, and we're seeing so in the beginning, one of the phrases that we heard a lot was, "We're all in this together." That was something that sort of united us, and it brought us together. And it actually, I feel like, was a bit of a substitute for like a little bit of hope. It provided a little bit of hope for people to go, okay, if we're all in this together, then I'm going to be able to get through this. I feel like that phrase has really evaporated. And there is no more, we're all in this together. They're very separate. Like you said, we've all made different choices during this pandemic, and I feel like it's divided us. So can you just talk about, what does this idea of we're all in this together mean now? Is there an we're all in this together?
Well, we're all experiencing COVID, but we're not together on it. And I think the overuse of slogans, becomes ineffective over time. And you can't just keep throwing out another slogan to try to make people feel hopeful.
Yeah.
But I think what's happened is it's triggered sarcasm, it's triggered reactive internal and external negative responses in us. Like, if I hear that one more time, I'm gonna whatever.
Right.
And so I think we have to be aware that that's happening. I'm going to hit into a strategy, even though it's hard, is we really have to be aware of what we're listening to. It's sort of, well, on Tuesday, we're going to get an update. And when this happens, we're going to do this. And we're going to find out about all the statistics, which, it's important to know to some extent, but when it's becoming so much of what we do. I said this the other day. There's some of the professional journals that I'm reading that it just feels like it's the same story warmed up over and over again.
Right.
And I think it's exhausting, and I think we need to continue to not listen as much, decide other things that we can fill our tanks with, that we can talk about, that we can not over focus on, and then try to come up with platitudes to say, well, I hope this will end soon, but we aren't doing things to actually focus our behaviors, our thoughts on stuff that really is more normal and helpful, and not sort of steeped in critical language. So it is a lot of listening less. I stopped listening. I'm not perfectly right on this, but I've stopped listening to the radio in certain ways now, or just, picking up stuff that creates an echo chamber, whether I'm aware of it or not. So I think what you listen to, can just get exhausting.
Yeah.
And what we talk about is exhausting with each other, because that's what we start with. It used to be before COVID in February, and I'd be in the locker room working out, and it would always be, boy, what do you think of this cold weather? Do you think the cold weather is ever going to end? And it would just cycle around.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's COVID, and it's, I'd rather talk about the weather, actually.
Yeah, we can go back to some of those conversations.
Yeah, because they're not so toxic, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that's hard. I guess it's hard to do when if you've decided, okay, my boundary is I don't really want to talk about this because it's causing some unhealthy things in me. I've heard actually from other people saying, how do I navigate my work environment? Or, because I can't control what people are talking about, but it's everywhere. It's all people are talking about.
Well, I mean, I know it's what I do, and I have a lot of assertiveness and confidence or competence around it. But I always think about whatever gossip or negative critical things have gone on over centuries, the strategy is to actually be preemptive. Use your playfulness, your humor, deflect, distract. It's not okay to just going, oh gosh, could you guys all stop talking about this? Like, then you're just going to make yourself a target and they just dismiss you. You really have to use your nuances to say, so anyways, when we finish talking about that, I have a question. And actually being really proactive, as opposed to getting kind of sucked into it, or just apathetic about it and just not engaging. So you'll often hear me say, be present, but you actually have to have a plan of what present looks like, because you can lead that, and you do it in order to keep yourself okay as well. Instead of just going, oh boy, here we go again, or adding to the sarcasm, or just becoming apathetic and critical and stepping out of it. You're not present then. So if you're not present, you might as well leave.
Right.
And if you can't make a change in it, then exit, or go take a conversation with somebody over somewhere else. You really do have to be proactive and deliberate and behaviorally strategic about how you let conversations happen, whether it's a Bible study, whether it's at work, whether it's with family. You really do have to lead that conversation out of it.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So some of this is also about like negative thoughts and negative self-talk. And again, back to these phrases and stuff, I feel like we've almost memorized some scripts over this pandemic that maybe we don't even know that we've memorized. Maybe we don't even know the sort of the loop that we have going around in our head that's interfering with our day-to-day life. What do you think about that?
Well, I think if there are people in our lives that we trust, sometimes it's important to say, look, when we get into this and I start getting critical, could you just, tap my leg, or could you just, make a joke or something that cues me to say, look, we're stuck in a loop here. But it also can happen just directly with your kids or your, the people that you care about or live with, where we start doing something that classically we all do. We make a statement and then we go down the rabbit trail by saying, why do people keep doing that? Why do they keep talking about this? Why is this happening? Why can't we get out of this? And then we move into all or nothing, always, never language or thinking. And some of those statements that we make that get us further into depression or anger or anxiety is, I can't stand this anymore. It's never going to get better.
Right.
My mom is never going to change, or it's all his fault, or it's all my fault, or we're never going to recover what we've lost through COVID, or nothing seems to be working, or, even if we step out of COVID, we could say things like, I'm tired of doing all the work for everybody at my office or my family. Why is this always happening to me? Why is this always happening to other people? So there are languages in there that make it more extreme. And I think we have to be kind of aware of what we're saying to ourselves and what we're saying to other people.
Right.
And I think be proactive. And it's not rocket science. You know, if you had a teenager that said it's always my fault, or it's, they go into that victim mode, don't argue with them. No, it's not always your fault. Like, then you're going down a rabbit trail with them. It's just moving into, I'm sorry it's so hard. That's my favorite line. I'm sorry it's so hard. That's an empathetic question, but it's not taking it on like, how can I help? It's still not a bad question, but just saying, it isn't actually all your own fault. And I think this will get easier. What would make a difference? What have you done before? Solution-focused kinds of thinking.
Right.
If you're talking to yourself, it's, this is really hard, but I know that this will pass, or I know there's something small I could do that would help this. I know that change is going to happen. It's sort of predicting a hopeful outcome versus getting stuck. And if people just kind of poo-poo that, it's like, you're always, in my family, you're always saying that. That's true. Anyway, and then deflect. Who wants tea? So
Right.
It is a dance that you do of being assertive and not being, the lecturer or the big coach, right?
Right.
But you have to be very aware of what you're thinking and feeling so that you can influence things with grace, with humor, with assertiveness.
Right.
And repeat.
Yeah. What I hear a lot of you saying is that it's going to take some of us to go first and sort of changing some of this dialogue. And what I've noticed, and I noticed this about myself, is it's just easier when you're in a group or you're with somebody who wants to talk about, complain about it, or why does that feel so much more uniting than talking about, I don't know. I hope that's not just me, but sometimes it does feel a little bit more uniting to talk about the bad thing, or to be like all on the same team with how terrible this is. And like, let's kind of work each other up. I feel like it's not as easy to step into sort of that role of, I'm going to try to kind of nicely shift or gently shift it in a little bit of a different direction.
Well, and we'll talk about this later, but it really is a strategy. It's going in without saying, oh, well, whatever happens, let it happen. It's just the usual deal with the family. Or
right.
I think you have to go in with, what am I here for? What's my role? How do I want to bring hope? How do I want to bring non-COVID related conversations? So you have to have a mindset that is looking for the gold in what's happening and then just unearth it. And actually it takes effort, but I think it takes less effort to do that than to get sucked into the vortex and later on just walk out feeling like Eeyore, right?
Right. Yeah.
I do think you have to be present to it. You have to make decisions. And I do this for a living, so I think for me it probably comes easier. Yeah. But I also get made fun of, oh, you're going in your happy mode, or I was like, yeah, and anyways, and you keep going because there's a sense that that consistency and being assertive in a way that isn't, parenting people. You're not going to convince them of stuff, but you can live it and ask it. You can be curious about things,
right,
as opposed to determinative and critical.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, nobody is supposed to do that all the time. So I will say that when I've tried my best, I'll go take a break. And I'll come back,
right?
Because then I can move back in with I'm not sucked into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll hear people kind of response to that is, well, I'm just being realistic. And I think you and I had talked a little bit about early in the pandemic, there was this sort of burst of incredible positivity. Like we had mentioned, that we'll get through this, or we're all in this together, but it seemed like such a surge of just this positive energy that sort of waned over time. And what's the difference between sort of this, I don't know if I'm sure you've heard this toxic positivity. What's the difference between just this overt, like, we're going to ignore everything that's going on and we're just going to choose to believe that it's all good, versus the strategy you're talking about with sort of flipping the script? Is there a difference in that?
Well, I think flipping the script, you can't just be, Pollyanna. You can't just, say something that doesn't have an anchor to it. So that's why I'm saying by changing the subject without, you're moving it in a different direction, and you're asking curious questions.
Right.
Not asking why questions. You're asking who and what, and, what's happened for you this week that, that's really important to talk about.
I like that because it seems
then
like
we have to get ourselves out of COVID conversations.
right. I like that because it seems like it's less about making statements and more
and arguing, and I think there are lots of people out there naturally who are oppositional defiant. They'll just go down there. It's stimulating for them. And, sometimes it's fine, but not in COVID. It's just become chronic. And so instead of saying, well, that's George, he always does that. It's like, I don't think that's a helpful thing if I'm going to hang around it. I don't need it to haunt what's happening. I think we can be more proactive rather than just apathetic or shifting into it.
Right. I think you just said something there that I find really interesting, that idea that, is it that being negative is more stimulating? Like, is that why maybe in a time where we've been so socially disconnected that we might gravitate towards sort of that negative?
I think it's a default, but I don't think it's more stimulating. I think you could argue with somebody on anything, pro and con, and that's stimulating for some people. For others, it's exasperating because they just keep pursuing and pursuing, because for some reason the stimulant is to win the argument.
Right.
And so where'd that get you? Other than people are frustrated with you and you've missed the cues.
Yeah. So, with the longevity of this pandemic and 2 years now, I think what we're really starting to see, just in my own experience, but you would have so much more experience with this, and I really want your, of course, opinions on it, is we're seeing a lot of family and relationship breakdown. I don't think we saw that necessarily in the first year, but in the second year, with a bit more divisive topics, different choices that we're making, and also seeing people say, no, that relationship's just done. And we're not talking just flippant relationships or casual relationships. We're talking about deep, meaningful friendships or family members that have been big parts of people's lives. And these relationships are just ending. I know that I heard from our pediatrician saying that there are marriages that are breaking up over the question of vaccinate my child or not to vaccinate, with parents who don't agree. And how catastrophic to come out of this with a bunch of parents who've had their marriage torn apart because of these huge discussions and decisions to be made. So I really want to focus on that a little bit, about this damage that's being done to our relationships. How do we build trust in our families and communities again?
Yeah. Well, I don't know for sure, but I do know that over the last 6 or 7 months, with the mandates happening in businesses and travel and all of those things, there's a huge amount of loss. But I think prior to that, people who had strong views that were counter to the family or relationships, they didn't talk about them. They didn't have to. It wasn't being pushed to the wall. And so when that happened, I think it became very divisive, people drawing lines in the sand. And we were scared, we are scared, we're angry about a lot of things. And we haven't done well with that. And so some of it's happened. I'm much more optimistic that when we get through this, that families, not necessarily marriages, but families can recover from this. If they decide that it doesn't have to be something that they let haunt them, to say, well, remember when you didn't want to come for dinner, and we were left with Christmas without you, and we can't see our kids. And those are memories. They'll get smaller if we don't draw the lines in the sand. We can't necessarily fix them now, but we can be hopeful, again, the word hopeful, about how will we extend grace. And when we're hurt, we draw the lines in the sand. I think it's just waiting and saying, you know what, I don't know how this is going to end. And right now I don't want to think about it because there's too many other issues and I'm too hurt. Yeah. But I really have a sense that over time, well, it's what I'm doing in counseling. So what would make a difference? So if you had a do-over, or when you get a do-over, are you going to actually stay in your corner, or can you move halfway and say, I'm so sorry this happened. Not, I'm sorry for my part, or you were right, or I was wrong. I'm sorry that this COVID got the best of our family. And I don't want that to be something that continues. But it is going to require those of us who have more grace and patience and will take the risks to be able to move towards with the repair. Remembering that repair isn't who wins.
Right.
Repair is, I want us to be in relationship again. And not like, let's just, forget about all that. You can't forget. You still have to repair where you hurt other people or where they hurt you. And then you move forward. Do you want to come for dinner? You don't talk about it beyond the repair move, which is, this was really hard.
Right.
How can I help? I think when we get hurt, we pull back and say, well, I'll wait for them to apologize first, or I'll wait for this, and I'm going to make them jump a lot of hoops. I think that's just going to prolong family. Well, we've had feuds for generations in families over stupider things, right?
Right.
So I don't have an answer other than we eventually have to make this smaller, and small enough to say, how will grace work in this? And can I be the person that introduces that grace, even if it's a risk? And sometimes it's not going to be the whole family that does it. It's going to be somebody that gets together for coffee and makes the extended olive branch, and then moves it beyond the pandemic stuff, because that's not sustainable, even in an argument when it's not relevant anymore.
Yeah. But
people have been hurt, and the family stuff, the marriage stuff, that's big stuff, and it needs to be addressed. And it's sometimes all about COVID, but sometimes it's about, how do we solve problems between us when it gets ugly? And
right.
Therapists like me are helpful, but it does need work for sure.
Yeah. So in some ways it's about COVID, in some ways it's not. It's really just revealing how each of us react. And so what about families that are in the middle of, let's say, because I've heard this, we're in the middle of, we don't agree, and every time we get together, it's a mess, and people leave angry and hurt and upset. What can you give families? Like, what is a good solution for that? A break, or?
Oh, yeah. And you've heard me talk about this when anger, anxiety starts getting really critically ugly, is taking a break.
Yeah.
But you don't, it's like when you take a timeout, you call the timeout, as opposed to not saying anything. And then people feel all sorts of things. You are going to be targeted for stating that you're going to take a break, but that's still better to design it, to talk about it, to say, I'm afraid, we're at a standstill here. And for now, it seems like the best thing for us to just figure out how we want to manage COVID. And I'll look forward to getting together, when it gets further along, when it gets easier for all of us. So somebody's calling it in sense, and other people might just say, well, that's stupid, we're never going to get together. Like, that's the all or nothing thinking and saying.
Right.
You have to wait it out. And when it gets to a place where it's smaller, you have to move towards. And sometimes it's not with a big family gathering. It's with 2 or 3. And the 2 or 3, by the way, don't start negatively talking about who's not there. Families do that all the time about everything, right? Oh, he's homeschooling their kids. I mean, they're not going to be, and they go on and change the subject to saying, they're doing the best they can. And they get to make their own choices. And it is really hard. I'm sure it's hard for them too. So you don't make platitude statements, you make neutral empathy statements.
I like that, neutral empathy statements. And again, circling back to this idea, like, at some point, somebody has to go first, right? Somebody has to choose grace. Somebody has to choose.
And I always look at it this way, for those people who are competitive, the person who extends grace first wins. Right? You win.
Yeah.
If you need to win. But it isn't about being right. It's about being gracious. It's about staying in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying you stay in something that's toxic for now, you have to exit. You have to just take a break or see someone else in the family but just remember, whoever you're with, don't talk about the other people's challenges. And if somebody does, your statement is neutral. It's sort of, yeah, it's really hard. I'll be glad when this is easier. That's a neutral statement versus, I don't want to talk about it, or I do want to talk about it. And you just get into family triangles that are classic, but you can add COVID to those, and that's not helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you have, is there any advice for just bringing, like, this is family and insular and a little bit more intimate, is just society wise, other than not participating? Do you have any views on or suggestions on how to just bring that temperature down? Like, does the grace context kind of move out beyond your family and really into how we operate in society?
Well, I still think my experience is we're listening to too much online. We're following things that, we talk about echo chambers, but they're very real. And we know we're doing it, but we do it anyway.
Right.
We know we're doing things that actually are stimulating us into justice and fairness and anger, and I have to fix this, or I don't like this, taking sides. It's just, it's really not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think we need to wait, and we need to stop, I think, trying to fix people and analyze people and talk about other things, do other things. And there's always arguments to say, well, we have to get to the meat of this. We have to get to the bottom of this. I mean, actually, sometimes we don't.
Right.
We need to wait it out. We need to be gracious. We need to not dig in and make lines in the sand. We need to stay in relationship, even if it seems like the big issues aren't being talked about, because sometimes they don't need to be,
Right.
in order to repair that we're hanging out. I think, for our listeners, I'm always about when things don't go well, when it's been messed up, I think it becomes, after a while, a humble move for me to say, what just happened there? What was my part in it?
Yeah.
What did I learn from it? And you can't ask, what did I learn from this, unless you start with some humility and be ready to kind of learn. And sometimes you can tell yourself, or you can talk to somebody you care about. This is, what did you see? What could I have done differently? But I think it's asking yourself, I screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
What would I do if I had a do-over? And I think that's important, because that's part of scripting and behavior. If I had this to do over with others, what would I specifically do? What would I say? How could I just construct the deliberate do-over rather than wait for them to do something or say something on it?
Right.
So it's role playing. I do so much of that in my work, and I love doing it. It's like, okay, I'll be them and you be you.
Yeah.
And tell me what I'm going to say that's going to make you upset. And then we'll talk about how you can language this and be assertive, or deflect, or move somewhere else, or show grace.
Yeah.
Without trying to win the argument. That's a classic line you probably heard that I love, which is, you can be right or you can be in relationships. It doesn't mean you're a doormat. It means you learn how to respond with grace, with hopefulness, with neutral empathy, without trying to win.
Mm-hmm.
Being stuck in patterns. And if you can't, then you take a break,
Mm-hmm.
A gracious break.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's really helpful, Gerri. Thank you. So for our last little bit that we have here together, I want to focus a little bit more on teens and teen mental health, because I think our teens have just been through so much. I think about people who, started their high school year right at the beginning of this, and might possibly go through the whole high school. The high school years were some of the most fun and some of the most formative, and we've got a generation that's going to miss out on huge chunks of their social development. So when we talk about teens and COVID and mental health, and I hear from parents about how many of their teens are really, really struggling with anxiety and depression. Now, is that just me, or are you seeing an increase in that? What is your perspective?
Yeah, I think loss always creates, not always, often creates a grief process where, you're reactive, it's not fair, you don't even know what you've missed, or your parents are talking about it. And there's just this sense of loss that we live in, or that they live in. And, I wish that it could go back to where it was and everything would just reset and it would go on. But I also think, to the extent that parents can, they do need to step into the gap, whatever that looks like. And I don't want parents to go, great, thanks, that's just more work. But to some extent, there are sacrifices we can and should make as parents where possible to engage and hang out with our kids when they don't have people to hang out with. Because I think some of this is nothing new under the sun. We just have to pay attention to what's going on with our kids, whether they're, being bullied, or whether they're on a team and get cut, or whether they're just isolated. And this is stuff we probably need to talk about, but it's nothing new under the sun. We just need to actually be very deliberate in understanding what's going on for our kids. It's definitely more challenging with COVID, but I think we have to make some choices. I think that the mistake a lot of parents make on an ongoing basis is, well, I had problems like this or worse, and when I was a kid, and I grew out of them.
Right.
I don't think that's a good default risk or assumption to make ever, and I'd certainly not during COVID. So you're right, going through this, well, we'll get over it, we're struggling, but we'll reset later. As parents, you can't reset your parenting of your kids.
Right.
So I can't state this enough to encourage parents. You are your kids' parents, and you are the most important people, particularly now when there isn't good influences or anybody in their lives, coaches or whatever. You have to be there because you're going to be there for the long term, before and after COVID. So you and your spouse, you need to stay together and stand firm as a team with one mind in how you're going to address hanging with kids. And I don't think you need to let COVID intimidate you, or how they're reacting to you intimidate you. So you're going to get intense moods, you're going to get oppositional moods and stances, you're going to get arguments, you're going to get defiance, you're going to get a whole lot of maladaptive behaviors from your kids. That hasn't changed. It might look different slightly in COVID because there's more victimizing. But don't default into apathy. You have to think creatively, and you have to be putting the structure in place, and you have to follow through. So it is a lot of work as a parent. If you have kids, that is still a priority, no matter what challenges that might involve for you. You get exhausted, but you have to stand in the gap right now for your kids. And that can be exhausting, but you have to protect their hearts and bodies and minds. And we didn't talk a lot about addictions, but they're there. And I've talked about this ad nauseum of online stuff that kids are involved in, and they just say, well, it's just gaming. And it is just gaming, except what is the gaming keeping them from in terms of engaging with tough stuff, with relationships? We're all doing it in some ways, what our default patterns are. And they're highly much more brain non-developed. They're more impulsive. They're more reactive. They're more susceptible to all kinds of addictions, not just chemical ones. So we need to spend more time with them, and we need to expect resistance. Hey, we're after dinner, we're going to play games. Oh, I don't want to play games. Like, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to go game. And they go, and they wait for you to have to come and get them. Do that. It's lots of work. But I think we're in a battle here for their hearts and minds, and always have been, and COVID just makes that trickier.
Right. And so what is your advice to parents who are, what can parents do, or what can they look out for, warning signs, or that their teen really isn't, or the youth really isn't doing okay at all. When to know, when to seek out maybe someone like yourself, some help of a family doctor or counselor.
Yeah. Well, as what we have now, there are school counselors. There is family counseling, but often teens don't want to come, right? And so I'll often say to whoever wants to come, we'll come and we'll talk about it. And the one message you want to give your teen is, hey, just so you know, I'm going to a counselor. You can come. We'd like you to come because actually we're going to be making some decisions for you while we're there because we're going to learn some stuff. Just so you know, it's
Right.
just, you don't kind of go with, well, I've had it with you. You really just need them to know that you're making decisions and learning stuff, and stuff's going to happen, and you might as well be part of it or not. Just always expect resistance. Don't know anything. It's the same kind of stuff, but don't let them isolate. Do not let them isolate. When I've talked about this, when your kid's in the room, do whatever you can to keep down the addictive stuff, but also just keep going in and checking in, right? They're hiding, they're being secretive in how their moods are, but also in whatever other behaviors. So just keep going in. Just keep, how are you? How are you now? What's going on? You want some cookies, or do you want to, I got a question for you. Go in and just be the pesterer in a fun-loving way, and you're going to get ugly resistance. Expect it and just keep going. Yeah. Anything I can do to help? That kind of question.
Right.
But when you know they're struggling, don't wait for them to ask for help. Go get it. Figure it out. Knowing that every step you take, they're going to they may not want you to do. And they'll show you defiance, or they'll show you apathy. Keep going. Because that's your job. Yeah. That is your job, even though it's discouraging. Sounds like we're getting into a depressed space here, but I'm not meaning to do that. I'm just saying you only have them for a short period of time, and it's exhausting, but don't give up, because you're their parent and you're the best hope they have for what's going on. And you have to be persistent with it. Yeah. But you can take them to doctors. You can talk about getting them into anything that'll distract them, that'll give them exercise. Well, and we always go with that. Like, the problem with teens is they're not active if they're not involved in some kind of activities or sports or fitness. No, we don't have a lot of stuff going on at the school level, but do it with your kids. Take them skiing, take them wherever. I don't want to go skiing. I know, well, but we're going to go anyway. And involve them in hiking, anything that you can do with them. It's time consuming, but exercise is still your best bang for your buck. Yeah. And if you're doing it with them, you're also getting the adrenaline boost. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
The only other thing I can think of, and we can talk more about this at a later point, but always interrupt something before it happens. So interrupt before they go in their bedroom and, start gaming or whatever it is. Interrupt it with, we're just going to go for a walk around the block before. Like something that doesn't allow them to jump into the default. Like, even if you talked about yourself and said, after work, it's the downtime of day, it's the hardest part of my day, so I just go home and sit on the couch and binge watch Netflix. Okay, but before you binge watch Netflix, which I'm not saying you can't do, I'm saying you have to interrupt that with doing something beforehand.
Right.
Calling somebody or anything that they don't want to do. And that's why it's like, stop on your way home and go for a walk or meet somebody. Anything that creates structure and accountability. And it's not like, well, I'll do it when I feel like it, because you'll never feel like it. Neither will your kids.
Right.
So it really is, it's hard work. It's just hard work. We signed up for it.
And I guess it sounds a little bit like, if Netflix or gaming or any of that kind of stuff is a bit of a way to disconnect or detach or escape from things, that we're just delaying that discomfort of staying connected for a little bit longer before you can. So not telling because I think you're right. If you just told kids, well, no more games, right? Like, I think that's going to be a problem. But if they have the need to go and game, but it is interrupted with a little, okay, let's just hold that discomfort of you can't quite have it yet, and then you can have it. I feel like that seems like a helpful suggestion.
Mm-hmm. But all of what you're allowing them to do is structured, no matter how long.
Right.
I've talked to kids about gaming, and they've talked to me lots about, well, there's some games that if you're playing with other people, you don't have the ability to just set a timer and get out of it. It has a certain length of time to it, but you really want to understand what exactly does that look like and negotiate how there's a start and an end versus when are they online? Well, if they don't have their phone or their devices somewhere where they can be accountable and modified, then they're always going to be doing it.
Right.
So it starts with really high degrees of structure that they're always going to fight back on.
Right.
And you have to provide that structure because they don't have impulse control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Gerri. So I think we're kind of at the end of our time here, but you and I had spoke this week about the possibility of you coming and doing an in-person seminar for parents, kind of directed around teens and mental health. And I think that's a fantastic idea. I think that many of our parents would really welcome some more strategies and just a space to be able to talk about the difficulties of parenting, not just young people now, but young people in a pandemic. But like you said, the problems exist with or without a pandemic. So I think that's a healthy and helpful conversation. So we will look forward to planning something like that in the future, maybe in the next couple months.
Yeah. And, if I were to say anything encouraging, it's just stay the course with us. We're going to get out of this when we begin to risk to engage again in difficult situations, when we make commitments to people, when we use some small amount of humility and forgiveness, when we do graduated exposure to others in situations that we'd rather not, or it's just not convenient anymore. I don't like the name new normal because it isn't normal, and it's not something that we need to default into. But we're gonna have to persevere and run with this, and we can't grow weary, and we can't lose heart. Right out of Hebrews 12, because Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And if there was an adage, that's it. Amen. We're in this together. It's Jesus Christ is here, and He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And we have to stay in community and not lose heart. So that's my encouragement.
I think that's a wonderful note to end on, and hopefully very hopeful for people listening, that there ultimately is hope to every situation, and certainly in this pandemic. So thank you, Gerri, for your time so much.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.